G'day Virtual Pilots, this is Requiem. This video is going to cover the Mosquito startup through Tigzy using my Cockpit workflows. So you can download those if you need to in the video description. You can see the trigger is going to be spawned in the airplane. That'll get this all going. This is the whole premise of how these flows work. We have a trigger and that kicks off the flow sequence. So we spawned in. First thing we're going to do is had the door open earlier, so I'm going to close that. So now we'll set the parking brake. We'll do that by holding down the brake lever, seeing the brake pressure increase on the gauge. Then we can hold in the wheel brake lock and then release the parking brake lever. So now we'll set the altimeter. I'm going to use field elevation in this case, which is at 160 feet. So I'll scroll the wheel until we get to 160. And the other way is you can use the window at the bottom to set the pressure in hectopascals. The bomb bay doors are closed and the selector is in neutral, so that's fine. Right click on the master switch and bring it up to the on position. Radiator shutters are closed. The fuel pump is off. And now to supply fuel for the engines, we're going to set the fuel selectors to the outer tanks on both, so the left and then right click. Fuel cutouts are in. Pressurizing cog is on, and the fuel transfer valve is off. On the radio, we'll set ATC. And the mixture control, that's at the bottom, which means it's in the rich position. And the supercharger switches down, which means it's in mod. Propeller RPMs all the way forward. And the throttle, bring it up at 1/2 inch. And then we're ready to have a look at the engine start flow. Now for the engine start, the ground crew is involved with this, so we need to open the window. That way it'll allow us to communicate with them. Using the comm menu. Now there's several options here. If you wanted to connect external power, you could do that, but we just want to start the primer for the engines.
On the starter. Copy.
So now we'll get the ignition on for the right engine. That way it'll continue running once it starts. Lift up the starter and boost coil covers. And then we'll press delete and home to push these two buttons at the same time. And we're going to hold them in while the engine starts. And once the engine starts, we can release them. And then we're going to have a look at the generator warning light. Make sure it's not blinking. That way we know it's working. And look at the oil pressure. Make sure we've got a rise in that, which we do. And then once that's verified, you can then set the RPM to 1200 using the throttle. And that way the engine will start the warm-up process. So now that one's done, we can get going on starting the left engine. This is the same process, but the primers are already running, so we can just skip that and go straight to the ignitions. Open the covers, and again, holding down delete and home. Continue holding it. Then once the engine starts, we can release them. Check in the oil pressure, make sure that's risen. And when you verify that, set the RPM to 1200. Now the engines are going to warm up, then we can check out the after start flow. So now that the engines are warming up, we can talk to the ground crew and disconnect the external power if we needed to. But in this case we don't have to, we're just going to remove the wheel chocks.
Chief, remove the wheel chocks. Copy. Wheel chocks are now removed.
So now that's done, we can close the window since we don't need to talk to the ground crew anymore. Turn on the remote compass switches. Now we're going to align the P8 magnetic compass. So in order to do that, get ourselves in position, and then you can left click and drag. And we're going to line up the north with the cross. So we'll left click and drag up, align those two, and then we'll look at the top line here and we see where that sits on the compass rose. That's showing about 269, 270. So we're using that. We'll come over to the directional gyro and we'll set 269er on that. Alright, that's set. You can open the radiators for both the left and the right engine. Turn the oxygen valve on. It's down the lower left. Now we can turn on the gun camera, navigation lights. We don't need to have the fuel pump on, so just get the pitot heat and the reflector sight. And the IFF power switch. Underneath here we've got the radio transmitter switches, which are on by default. Then we can turn the transmitter F switch on and see a blinking light showing it's working. And since the engines are warming up, we're going to set the fuel clocks to main supply. And that'll complete the after start process. So now you can check out the pilot's notes for the Mosquito Mk.VI. So now the engines are started, we're going to taxi. First thing we need to do is disengage the parking brake. So we'll just tap the brake lever and that'll turn it off. So now that's set, we can increase the power and then use the brake to make sure it's working. We've got pressure. Now we're going to make a left turn onto the taxiway. So as we start increasing the power and we'll start rolling. You can use the brakes with the rudder to create differential braking, as well as some differential power if you wanted to make your turn tighter. So if you're making the left turn here, you'd have to use the outside engine to increase the power on that. That'll help you turn a little bit tighter if you want. So you can generally S-turn using that technique along the taxiway. Otherwise, if you really wanted to get better visibility, you can lift yourself out of your seat using track IR if you wanted to do that. That'll increase your visibility over the nose. And a good taxi speed you can get away with between 1200 and 1500 RPM. But then once you're rolling, you can pull it back a little bit. Just make sure you keep it above 1000 RPM just so you don't risk flooding the engines with excessive fuel. That'll complete this video on the startup through taxi the Mosquito. Next will be the one covering the takeoff through shutdown. Until next time, remember to fly safe and check 6.